How times change. The gap in time between this review and the 2012 Olympics is bigger than the gap between this episode and the opening ceremony. This is a testament to how late to the game I am more than anything else, but nevertheless, I've been wanting to talk about this one for a good while for many reasons. The biggest one being that at one point it had the lowest rating of all Doctor Who episodes, and then Series 11 came along. Fear Her is remembered as being another Russell T. Dud episode. I left my reviews of Series 2 rather abruptly unfinished, with my Love and Monsters video being uploaded in 2016. So, without further ado, let's criticise and analyse Fear and Loathing in London 2012. The episode kicks off in good old suburban London, specifically on Dame Kelly Holmes Close. On this street lives an old woman.
Storm's coming up, Annie. You better get home quick.
She seems to have this strange sixth sense of being able to detect when something bad is going to happen to the children on the street. We are introduced to the unsettling score of this episode, which I quite liked. The use of chimes is great, adding a chillingly childish wonder to this ordinary neighbourhood stricken by missing children. The choices of music play a key part in showing us the troubled Chloe Webber as she sings alone in her bedroom. It's creepy, and even the lyrics "Kookaburra Gay Your Life Must Be" add a tone of jealousy to her character from the offset. The animated drawing she concocts is disturbing, and the setup for the episode is quite effective. After the title sequence, the awkward positioning of the TARDIS provided some unexpected comic relief to the Doctor's entry. His miscalculation was only by a matter of turning the ship 90 degrees like an old man trying to park his car. After nosying about the local neighbourhood, the Doctor starts getting the same tingles the old lady had. He inspects the football net with a discomforting level of excitement, whilst Rose is just off on a wander for the lost children, presumably. A car then breaks down right in front of her, where a roadman from the local council decides to help out.
And you know what? It's bonkers. Bonkers.
The Doctor nearly gets the shit beaten out of him by this big burly rugby player, which results in a strange meeting of the locals on the street. We get some casual racism from one lady who, get this, doesn't believe in evil, whatever the hell that means. And then there's this guy, the lonely extra. All the dialogue that gets exchanged sounds like it would have come out of a child's mouth, which I would ordinarily be complaining about if David Tennant didn't absolutely rock this episode. Fingers on Lips was great. Fingers in the Jam Jar is hilarious. I like me some David Tennant fingers, I do. Meanwhile, barely keeping it together mum Trish goes upstairs to talk to her deranged daughter. In terms of the set design, I really like this wall of drawings, describing visually the extent of her powers. Trish turns on Chloe's laptop and there's BBC News 24? Laptops don't do that. Kids don't watch the news. But considering iPlayer was only a year away from its initial release when this episode aired, I think I have to give the episode some credit for at least considering the possibility of TV being watched on computers, whilst I quietly laugh at the superiority of online content. Anyway, Rose and Doc then find a cat in the street, and at this point in the episode I was beginning to wonder what the pair's game plan was. I get they've landed somewhere close to the stadium and would be going to see the Olympics 6 years before the rest of us, but were they planning on doing anything before then? Maybe find a spot of dinner or something? This aimless wandering leads the pair to be separated again, where Rose winds up opening a random garage door after hearing some banging. I don't really have much to say about the scribble creature really, only that it serves its utility in the following scene where they figure out it's made of graphite. This leads the pair to Trish's house, where they ask to see her daughter, thinking that Chloe might be able to give them a hand? Imagine for a moment that we saw all of this taking place from the perspective of CCTV cameras. The pair would look like utter troublemakers and weirdos, and would in all likelihood have been arrested at this point. It's here that the whole episode starts feeling like an Exorcist movie to me, with the exception that Trish doesn't seem to care about solving her child's issues. She welcomes two complete strangers into her house, house, one proclaiming to be a doctor without having any proof of which, and saying he was a police officer not 10 minutes earlier. You'd think this would muddy the water somewhat, and yet here they are in her home. There are, however, some nicely handled overtones of prior abuse within the household, and it was interesting to see Rose being lured into the wardrobe, for she too lost a father. The aspect of missing fatherhood and abuse, however, is overlooked and feels very separate from the main narrative. It's clear that the Isolus, the creature that inhabits Chloe, needs to suck up as many people as possible into the drawings to cure its loneliness. Chloe has been affected deeply by the loss of her abusive father, but no opportunities are given for her to express any feelings because the alien inhabiting her is more important to the Doctor and therefore by extension the narrative. If, for example, the father had been drawn 6 days ago and locked up in the cupboard, this would tie the plot lines together, but instead he died a whole year ago in a car accident. What I think the writers were going for is the idea that she had drawn a dead person and therefore the only drawing to talk. The problem is that the drawing doesn't actually do any harm to anyone, and so I'm prompted to wonder why somebody didn't just tear it down. It's obvious there was a concern for a grander narrative here, relying on the familiar sci-fi elements instead of tapping into some localized horror, creating interesting character arcs for both Trish and Chloe. After the exorcism, the Doctor returns to the TARDIS where Rose asks him about his family. He says that he was a dad once and then shrugs off the rest of the conversation. This was nice though, as it parallels Trish's reluctance to engage in her family. Before they can find the Isolus space pod thing, however, the Doctor gets zapped away and Rose is left on her own. I'm most often happy when the Doctor gets taken away from episodes temporarily, as it ups the stakes and prods the audience not to take him for granted. The only problem is that later in the episode, the drawing of him points to the Olympic torch to indicate what needs to be done. I'm just curious why they bothered making him disappear if he's just going to solve the problem anyway. The drawings kinda lose their significance on the way too. None of them move like the one in the opening of the episode did, and I'm curious what would be the effect of tearing or burning one of the drawings. Then things go from weird to worse. I honestly have never seen a tarmac enthusiast in my life, and I don't believe for a second in Kel's character whatsoever. Not only does it grill on the ears every time he says the council, but his dedication to the council isn't funny either.
Cancel, 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 cancel.
Then Chloe draws the audience of the stadium, and we get another example of her mother being a total vacuum cleaner character. Despite Rose telling Trish not to leave Chloe alone, not 2 minutes later does Rose find her standing in the living room with some lovely apple juice. Her response is absolutely amazing too.
My God!
When you have all of this stupidity stacking up, it's hard to tell if the producers honestly wanted us to take this episode seriously or not. On the one hand, you're handling subject matter like children going missing, and so a certain level of threat is taking place. But on the other, you have Bob the commentator going missing despite her drawing the crowd and not the stadium.
Not you too, Bob.
The cherry on the cake of all this, though, is when Rose just starts smashing down Chloe's door with that pickaxe she got off the council.
Here's Johnny.
So, because the news reporter describes the Olympic torch as a beacon of love, apparently this is enough reason for Rose to suddenly run outside and try her luck at getting the pod inside the beacon. Now, this all sounds like convenient airy-fairy bollocks to me, but I think it goes deeper than that. The BBC used the torch as a solution to the problem of this story because they had to keep the public under the impression that the Olympics would be a good thing for the UK. We have to bear in mind that after the announcement that the UK would be hosting the Olympics, there was a lot of doubt about the investment. It would be fair to say, though, that the BBC would be one industry that had a lot to gain from the 2012 Olympics, given the millions of people that would be watching their broadcasts. This, I think, explains why you see so many scenes in this episode where people just watch TV. The kids then return from the paper place, and I don't think I've seen a more lukewarm response to lost children returning to their families. Just, hey, we're off to the Olympics! That is except for Chloe and her mum. They mysteriously get locked inside their house by a drawing. This scene would work so much more effectively at representing abuse if there wasn't a physical presence lurking upstairs. This removes the idea of the father being a psychological omnipresence and instead replaced by a big scary monster in the wardrobe. Then we're back to watching the Olympics on TV again with that annoying Welsh commentator. He even repeats his mantra about the torch being a symbol of love, courage, and all that bollocks. And despite it all, the footage of the Doctor running with the torch feels so empty. This one shot of the not historically accurate CGI stadium prevents us from seeing any human beings, and the BBC think this is a good way to convince the 2006 audience that all this will be a good investment? Hooray, some fireworks in my nan's back garden. So, did it suck? Yeah, I suppose it did. I'm reluctant to say this only because there are some really good ideas and moments in this episode. The music's great, the use of the Kookaburra song I really liked, David Tennant does a good job, and themes of family bubble softly under the surface of it all. However, there are some totally unbelievable characters in this neighborhood. The pointlessness of this adventure, the lack of story development, and propagandizing of the 2012 Olympics makes this quite the painful episode to sit through 12 years on. I give Fear Her a 3 out of 10. Thanks for watching. What did you think of this episode? Comment below or join us for a discussion on Discord where we will continue this discussion.